Hello there, wonderful people. Thanks for joining me, your good friend, your faithful friend, once again, Marvin Mukanaka here. So, I just caught some news, I think this happened like 2 days ago, where one of the Zulu Kings, or the king of the Zulus in South Africa, has gotten involved, and I'm glad that he has. Thumbs up. And, you know, as soon as I saw this clip, which I'm going to show you in a moment, I was so thrilled, especially the fact that the man sounded very emotional, like he's really making an emotional appeal and really just putting out a case for foreigners in South Africa. We know what happened with the Chidimma issue, Chidimma having been taken off the contest of Miss South Africa, and then she went on and she accomplished something else elsewhere, which we don't have time to talk about. We've talked about those things before. You can see the videos I've done on that. But I want you to watch this clip where the king of the Zulu himself has gotten involved in xenophobia in South Africa because it's gone too far. And then we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But take a look at what the king of the Zulu said about 2 days ago, and I'll come back.
Mr. Zulu used the Umkosi Welembe to call for the acceptance of foreign nationals in KwaZulu-Natal. The king took to the podium during the commemoration of the annual event in Guatuguza in KwaZulu-Natal.
Bawethu asimasuphatha kabi noma ukuhlukumeza abantu bangaphandle. Singabashaya. Masenze kanjalo uyobona Zulu mnyama angeke sinikeze inkinga kubalulekile uba sikhumbule ukuthi nabo bangabantu abazonelwa. Ngiyabona nani senikhathele lokhu ningizwa ngikhala ngalobu bugebengu obunesibhamu phakathi ukuthi ziphuma phela izibhamu ezingaka futhi zikulesi sifunda namaphoyisa akhathele ukubulala abantu manje. Ake niyeke sizwe sikaMageba lokhu akusifanele kusidumisa kabi.
So there you see, I don't know if you see the emotions of the man personally. Personally, I saw a man that was really gripped by this issue of hostility towards foreigners. And he did some explaining there, which agrees with what my original take on the issue when I heard about how Chidimma was treated. I gave out my own feelings. And unfortunately, there were still some South Africans who were castigating me and still calling me kwere kwere because of the fact that I was putting up a case for Chidimma and for foreigners, just speaking against this bad treatment or hostility or xenophobia, or as some are calling it now, Afrophobia, when I was speaking against it. But again, thanks to a lot of you South Africans, and I think that there are few South Africans really who are not xenophobic, but hats off to you South Africans who are against this idea of xenophobia, including the king himself having to speak out. Now, I picked out a few things when I heard the king speak there. I kind of felt like he was really not targeting, but he was making an appeal to some politicians who have been in the front line of attacking foreigners, such as McKenzie. As far as I'm concerned, my record shows me that he has something against foreigners. And it's very interesting because even in the case of Chidimma, one of the things that was picked out against Chidimma and used against her was the fact that her name doesn't sound South African. And I did a follow-up video where I talked about, what about, what's the musician's name? Itani Madima. Itani Madima is a person is a musician I've met personally. For those who don't know, a number of people in Zambia would tell you that there was a time Chidimma Madima, I beg your pardon, Itani Madima. I'm going to be mixing up those two names. You see, because they sound very, very similar. You can't tell this is Nigerian and this is South African. You see, so let me correct myself. Madima, Itani Madima. There was a time Itani Madima came to Zambia to do musical performances. And I personally was his chauffeur. I was his chauffeur. I drove him around, would drive him to the hotel and to the place of his performance, to the venue of his performances, 3 days in a row. 3 days in a row. And I was with a very, very good friend of mine who actually was the owner of the car I was driving. So this is just to show you that a lot of us in Africa, we have this admiration and connection with South Africans, and we just don't understand why South Africans are hostile toward foreigners. Hostile in particular to Zimbabweans and Nigerians, but foreigners in general, people they consider foreigners in general. But I'm so happy to hear the king there speak out. But back to the issue of McKenzie. McKenzie was in the front lines of attacking Chidimma and even issuing a rallying call against foreigners, that foreigners should not be in the country. And yet McKenzie himself, listen to that name McKenzie. The issue was raised about Chidimma's name, that it doesn't sound South African. What about McKenzie? Grayson McKenzie is a politician in South Africa. He is in the government. McKenzie to me sounds like a cowboy from Dallas, Texas. McKenzie, that's not an African name. And yet Chidimma was attacked and hated for having a name that does not sound South African. So I'm glad to be able to see a king coming in, and I think I'm hoping that more and more people in that kind of position will come and join the conversation until this problem of xenophobia is gotten rid of in South Africa. In my own personal opinion, white people are the ones that have caused this problem in South Africa. Some of you might again jump on me and say, there you go again, picking on white people. You just hate white people. But let me explain this. Do you think it's just a coincidence that South Africa, being the only country right now that has foreign influence in its leadership, or has been governed by white people, or still has issues with white people in terms of land and many other things, do you think it's a coincidence that this is the only country in Africa where black people hate other black people? Do you think so? It can't just be a coincidence. I believe that this that white people have done historically, where they go into a region or a place or location and cause people to hate each other, is what is going on in South Africa. They have somehow convinced black people in South Africa that your problem is other black people. They've convinced them. And yet the problem of South Africa is white people themselves. And we all know that. So, but I'm so happy to see, to hear and see a statement coming from such an influential figure as the King of the Zulu. He has laid out the case very, very, very well. But there's another interesting piece to this before we go away. Now, Grayson McKenzie, as much as he's been campaigning against foreigners, really contradicting what Julius Malema has been saying. Because Julius Malema has made a good case for foreigners, that South Africa needs foreigners. And a part of that campaign is the fact that he believes a lot of South Africans came from so many different places, which is true. So you can't really make that distinction. Where do you draw the line? But Grayson McKenzie, at an event about less than 2 weeks ago, surprisingly had a change of tone. I don't know whether he was campaigning for support for whatever his vision is. I don't know. But for some reason, the audience that he was addressing, which obviously had foreigners, he had a different tone. He was sending out a different message. And I was surprised. Listen to what he said about 2 weeks ago, contrary to what he's been saying against foreigners throughout his political campaign. Listen to what he said about 2 weeks ago.
Heroes. Zambia, Zimbabwe, Russia, Angola, Nigeria, all these countries. Ambassador, when our people had nowhere to go, you opened your doors for them. When there was nowhere, you opened your doors for them. All those countries with our fallen heroes, you opened the doors for our people in South Africa. But you did that at great risk to your own country. Some of your country men died in the process of opening the doors for our soldiers. Some of them paid the price because they opened the doors for South Africans. And that's something that we should never forget. But that's also something that we should speak about. And we will be very dishonest. We will be very dishonest, and I have no intention of being dishonest here today, if I don't acknowledge the role that your countries has played in opening the doors for our people and hosting them and looking after them and caring for them and giving them medicine and giving them shelter. You have done that.
So there we go. So now, this left me in a place where I don't know which McKenzie to relate with. The McKenzie that now all of a sudden likes foreigners, appreciates foreigners, is appreciative of what countries such as Zambia did and all of that. I don't know which McKenzie to take here, but at least you've seen it for yourself. I don't know whether he's really had a transformation of heart or it's just politics that he's playing. But anyway, the goal of this video was to show you that, a king of the Zulus in South Africa has joined this conversation. And I just would like to think that he has been touched by the treatment against Chidimma, what was done to Chidimma, throwing out of the country and things like that. And then more of the conflicts that have been coming in South Africa, happening between South Africans and Nigerians, and South Africans and Zimbabweans, just generally South Africans trying to push out people they consider foreigners, but not having a problem with the foreigners who are white people. Very interesting. And I'd like to believe somehow, this king must have been addressing some of the politicians in South Africa. We'll keep a watch on that. After I saw this clip, I just said to myself, when I make a trip to South Africa, remember I've promised to go to South Africa to look at those biblical sites, which allegedly are the original sites, biblical sites, to go and do some ground on the ground investigations. This is one man I'd love to pass through his heart and village, and whether it's a constituency, and go and shake hands with him for these kind words that he has issued that are uniting people, intended to unite Africa. All right, give me your comments as usual. This is your faithful friend Marvin. I'll see you on the next one. For now, let's go catch the day. Bye-bye.